when we decide on a release and when we price our video games, we price it lower so that when players buy a game from us, they feel like they're getting a bargain.
Right?
I thought I was used to losing people.
Yeah, me too.
I guess I'll start first and just asking quite a simple question, really. But in your mind, what makes a Kepler Interactive game? You know, you've got a very broad portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, we care about quite a few things when we create a video game and when we select one. We have our internal studios making their own games, and then sometimes we sign games from third-party developers. And I think we operate under a few different things that we think are really important. I think fundamentally, the rules for us are we want video games that have a very strong identity, both visually and in terms of gameplay mechanics. That's really important for us. We also look at games that we call timeless, games that offer something so unique and so different that they kind of sit a little bit outside of the release schedule. We have a title called PBKK, where you operate a planetary defense cannon. Very unique, very strange. And I think for us, those games are really interesting because fundamentally players are going to feel excited about this specific thing. And so it doesn't really matter when they launch. We care a lot about games that are authentic, where the creators want to tell a story that is very personal, something that they have experienced quite profoundly. And so games like Sifu, where the creative director has practiced Kung Fu for many, many years and want to retranscribe it in a perfect way. Pacific Drive, where the creative director used to drive up the woods in the Pacific Northwest with an old beat-up station wagon, reading sci-fi books, and same, wanting to kind of capture the experience. And so even if you're not familiar with the worlds that are being retranscribed, the things that are present in those games, I think you'll feel the authenticity come across. And I think that's something that to us is really, really important. And then just finally, exceptional experiences. I think we are living in an industry where players have access to exceptional video games on a weekly basis. And if you want to deserve their attention, their money, I think you need to bring something to the table that's truly great and truly special. And if you don't, then it's perfectly okay for them to vote and say, we're just not very interested in what you're making.
And you've got Ontos coming up as well on your slate. You've got Orbitals. I wonder, what was it about those games that stood out for the company?
Yeah, they're interesting because Ontos is made by a team called Frictional out of Sweden. We were huge fans of their previous title, Soma, Amnesia. And when they started telling us about Ontos, we immediately felt excited. I think there's a really profound story around the game, but there's also some really interesting philosophical concepts behind some of the choices you make as a player. And I think sort of the is this game intellectually interesting is a really constant conversation for us. And so we were starting to unpack a little bit some of the motivations, some of the story, the dilemmas that the player is going to face during the experience. And we felt like this is going to be something really interesting for people. Orbitals is created by one of our internal studios out of Japan, Shape Farm. I think Orbitals brings this really incredible level of innovation around the way an anime aesthetic is being represented in a video game. And I think throughout the years, we've seen a lot of games that are based on existing anime, but I think there isn't quite been a game to date that has perfectly captured the essence of what makes an 80s space anime visually accurate, and translating that between a 2D thing into a 3D space was really, really difficult. So the team actually spent, I think, 2.5 years in R&D to actually get the visuals right. We did even go and try to buy a lot of original cells, backplates from the era so that the teams could understand sort of the design choices, the creative choices, around how to get the aesthetic perfectly right. And then we also have a partnership with a studio called Masquette, which does the animated cutscenes in game. And they're a very revered animation studio. So they also quite often would chime in on it. Hey, I think you're getting this specific color incorrect, or this angle isn't done the way we would have done it. And so that helped really make sure that we are respectful of the era and just try to transcribe something where the players feel a connection.
I wonder what, in your view, is an indie game in the industry anymore? You know, do we need new terms to define these type of things?
I think it's always a little difficult to create categories around video games because we all operate in shades of what an experience is. And I think We've seen games that are, coming from very small studios, but with really high production values. Expedition being one of those titles where you see an incredibly good-looking video game on screen, and I think it does start blending blurring the line between what's independent, what's not independent. And I don't know if the labels matter as much as the things we're able to create. And that I think what's fundamentally exciting is that today teams that are really small can produce video games that are seen as interesting, as good, as profound as teams of hundreds of people. And I think it's exciting as an industry that we are able to create exceptional experiences at all scales and all level. And if you look at the most popular games on Steam this year, a number of them were made by really, really small teams. Peak being one of them that was really great. RP there, yeah, there's some just really exciting content that's coming out every week by tiny teams, and I think we like that.
I mean, do you think in that essence, then, is that idea of this massive, triple A team model, is it maybe no longer sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, I think things are changing, and I think player taste is also adapting. I think that historically there was always some sort of space in terms of like the visual fidelity that was giving the larger company a lot of comfort because it was really difficult to achieve. I think there is less importance given by players on how high the visual fidelity is when you play a video game today. I also think sort of the size of the experience, the depth, the number of hours you get out of the content is maybe less important than how exceptional, how interesting, how novel the experience is. And then there's a pricing issue. I think ultimately we've seen a number of larger companies increase prices quite regularly. And I think we've kind of taken the opposite action. And so when we decide on a release and when we price our video games, we try to think, what do we think the price should be? And then we price it lower so that when players buy a game from us, they feel like they're getting a bargain. And we want them to feel like we are respectful of their money, respectful of their time, and that fundamentally every time they buy a game from us, they're getting a great deal. And so I think that's an important aspect of trust. And we're excited for players to be able to play 5, 6 different experiences with the same amount of money than a traditional AAA game would bring them. And so that makes more room for companies of our size, for smaller studios to get access to players and ultimately help flourish really innovative and interesting content.
What's Kepler's view on the use of generative AI? Obviously, I know there was this slight issue with Sandfall being disqualified from the Indie Game Awards for Clair Obscur just for not disclosing that there was some AI generated textures that which they did remove, a few days later. But I was interested in, your kind of thoughts on the use of it.
We're a very creator-centric, people-centric, and very analog almost organization. And so for us, we actually take the view that doing things that are well crafted by people actually creates a huge differentiation for us. And that ultimately people will feel, again, the authenticity, the honesty in the things that we make. We're very actively involving actors into the games that we make so that we have very human and powerful performances. And we've seen it for Expedition, right? Like you see Jennifer English's work, who won the Game Award, and her performance from Al was really moving. And I think it creates a deeper connection with players. And so I think for us, it is really an important part of who we are as a company. And I think we're actually moving more towards doing things in a more analog way. And you've seen it for Orbitals, where a lot of work was done in a very analog way, taking the original cells and trying to do paint overs and learning the processes. Or we're working on a magazine, which I'm not supposed to say. I'm going to get probably scolded after this, but a physical magazine, because it's something that we think connects us to people and want people to be able to hold something and touch it and have an interaction. And so I think as people move away from the more physical, the more human touch, I think we want to find that as a place where we find a lot of comfort. And it may not be for everybody, but we know that there's an audience that's going to care about well-crafted, human-crafted products.